Thanks so much for that introduction, Faye. The number of years ago that I started my career just keeps getting larger as we do more of these webinars. So, um, yeah, today I hope it's going to be an interesting topic. We're going to look at organizational dynamics because I think it is really important. If I assume that most of us here are M&E practitioners in some way or care about M&E in an organization, and if you want your organization to get better at M&E, then technology is important, processes are important, but learning how to bring that change to an organization is also essential. And so we're just going to reflect on some of the dynamics that we've seen, working with so many different organizations, different types of organizations, and share some of the things that we've seen that work. So, well, I want to start off by talking about centralized versus decentralized organizations, some of the challenges that come along with those. And then we'll look at two different pathways to building change, improving M&E at an organizational level that we've seen work. We're also we're gonna spend some time looking at ActivityInfo, the technology itself. Only part of the M&E puzzle, but that's the part that we focus on. So we're gonna look at that today as well in some detail. And if we have time at the end, we'll talk a little bit about the capability maturity model and how that can help plan the processes and the next steps within your organization. So yeah, kind of a mix of some theory, digging out my old textbooks from university on sociology, and some practical tips. So okay, I mean, first off, centralized versus decentralized. Yeah, Brendan, what do you think when you hear that centralized versus decentralized organizations? Does that say something to you with all the organizations you've worked with? Is that
Yeah, it's something that I come across in kind of there's different dimensions to how I think about centralized versus decentralized. I think of kind of the tension between top-down approaches where there's high degree of standardization that's kind of pushed down geographically, maybe through regional offices, country offices, versus the kind of freedom and independence of project-based, program-based, country-based approaches, and kind of that tension between the two, and kind of getting the pros out of both of those. It could also be something as simple as funding structures, right?
yeah,
Where you
yeah,
might have decentralized funding and projects versus more top-down institutional funding that could have an impact on the organizational dynamics, right?
yeah, yeah. I think, and that the funding is a big driver. I think, but you can really see this in the different organizations. You have some where very clear leadership, and somebody can stand up and say, okay, this is what we're doing today. This is how we're going to do M&E. And other organizations where they say, I can't tell a country office what to do. That's not
Yeah.
for, I'm not, I don't have that authority. I don't have that power. So it can be, it can be really challenging, especially in a decentralized organization where you might have some sectoral experts in headquarters, but they're not in charge, or maybe they don't have the authority to
Yeah.
tell people to get in line. Um, yeah, I mean, do you think bringing change is easier in a centralized organization, or what do you think?
I think they both have their challenges, and honestly, I think it's kind of what you're hoping to achieve with those. Is it coordination? Is that your end goal? Is
Yeah,
it just high degree of standardization? I think you can achieve a lot even in just coordination, understanding what people are doing, sharing knowledge, best practices, or there's the other approach, which is designing it all and having very structured and kind of rolling it out. So it really depends on kind of what
yeah,
you're hoping to achieve. And I would hope that your goals of what you're hoping to achieve with these systems will shift whether you are centralized or decentralized.
yeah. I mean, and I think that's a good point. Is like, harmonization, coordination. That doesn't have to be standardization or turning everything
Yeah.
into a one size fits all model, because that might not work for your organization. Now, I'm curious to hear from the audience. You're all working from, I can see in the introductions, from World Vision to Plan International, WeWorld. Um, Maybe just take a moment to reflect, and I'll put up a poll in a minute, but just take a minute to reflect. Is your organization, how would you characterize your organization? And any reflections that you want to share with the group about making change within your organization, it's very welcome. Stick it in the chat, and I hope we'll have some time at the end to kind of summarize, or just for people to share those. Um, the other point I want to make is about how communication works in these different types of organizations. So, I'm just picking a kind of a geographic example. If in a centralized organization, you might have two countries like Burkina Faso and Nigeria, which are separated by a little bit of distance and by language, but there might be similar programs in those two countries. And if those two countries wanted to coordinate in a centralized organization, the lines of communication might be quite long, right? Because you might have to go from Burkina Faso to the regional office in Dakar. Dakar, might need to coordinate with somebody in Geneva to get a hold of the regional office in Lagos, and back down again to Nigeria. But one of the advantages of a decentralized organization is that the lines of communication tend to be denser. There tend to be more of them, and there might be opportunities for those connections to be made much quicker and more richly. So, if you have regional fora, if you have these kind of communities of practice, it might be much easier for someone in Burkina Faso to pick up the phone and talk to someone in Lagos or in Nigeria directly about a program, and say, hey, how did you tackle this problem, or how are you managing data collection in your country? So that communication can be much richer. And I found this nice summary of attributes about these different types of organizations. There's basically a theory in sociology that organizations develop in response to the complexity of their environment. So if you're in an environment that's relatively standardized, it's not changing very often, it's stable, then centralized organizations can be very effective, because basically what you're doing is you're trying to do the same thing over and over and over again very well, with a high degree of standardization, right? And in this case, centralized organizations can be very efficient. If you're essentially implementing the same program in 30 countries, you don't really want 30 different ways of doing it, or everybody having to invent the wheel over and over again. You just want to find the best way and do that, and reproduce that, scale that, amplify that. But in a different environment or in a different area, especially, it's no coincidence that in the humanitarian space we have many decentralized organizations. The constant changing nature, that dynamic, whether that's events on the ground, or now we're dealing with funding and funding crises, but the level of change just requires much more of a decentralized approach, because centralized organizations, they'll quickly be overwhelmed, because there's one person in Cape Town or in Geneva or Nairobi. They can't manage so many different local challenges, whereas a decentralized system is really set up to do that well. So I don't think it's a surprise um, that we have so many decentralized organizations in our sector. But what I do hear from what I do hear from a lot of people in decentralized organizations is that sometimes it can lead to a bit of powerlessness, because you might think, well, I want to improve M&E in my organization, but I can't tell people what to do. I can't just call people up and say this is what we're going to do. So it can be more challenging for people to get started on uh, harmonizing, improving M&E across an organization. But I do think it's important. You know, if even if you're not standardizing or turning it into, we do this every single time, having some level of harmonization of M&E across your organization is important. I mean, one is for accountability. Um, how in the end you want to be able to advocate for your organization's mission. You want to be able to show your donors as an organization what you've achieved, not just individual projects. And so you need to be able to have numbers that you can compare and aggregate. Just as for accountability is kind of the I see as the bare minimum for M&E. But you also want to benefit from economies of scale. If you're a larger organization, or even if you're a growing or a small organization that's growing, you want to take advantage of that scale. Um, you know, I'm going to say the phrase over it a couple times today, but you don't want to reinvent the wheel in every single project. You want to benefit from the fact that you're a large organization, and not 30 different smaller organizations. Um, and of course, learning is where I think M&E has the greatest potential. Is that you want to be able to compare data, compare findings, lessons learned across contexts. If you're working on education, can you point to a method that an intervention that really moves the needle across many different countries, and then apply that to different regions? Can you combine data to make your findings more powerful or more specific? So I think being able to, and that's having a harmonized system so that you can have some level of data comparison across contexts is important there. And finally, efficient knowledge transfer. It's very common for staff to move around within the organization, between projects, between programs, or even between country offices. And so you want to take advantage of that, and so that when somebody moves from Libya and they spend some time in Jordan, that they don't have to learn a whole new process, a whole new technology. They should be able to hit the ground running wherever they're working. Um, so those are some of the reasons that I think it is important to work towards improving, harmonizing M&E at an organizational level. Um, and like I mentioned before, I'm not sure if this diagram is super clear. Apologies for that, but maybe we'll get some feedback as this. But broadly speaking, I've seen two different paths that seem to be effective in um, uh, decentralized organizations. And one you could call bottom up, though. Again, if you don't have a hierarchy, what's the bottom? But you know, the idea is you start at the field level and work your way out, almost like an ink blot. So you start with one country, really get a good process, get a good system down, and then try and reproduce that in another country, in three countries, four countries, until that you have a momentum going that you can then standardize or enshrine across the organization. But the other approach is that you can start with a top-down approach, but on a more lighter level, right? Again, decentralized organizations, you can't always tell people what to do or impose certain things. But if you do start with something simple, like we just want to identify these 12 key indicators, or better yet, 6 key indicators, um, then that is something that is manageable even in a decentralized organization, and you can use that as a basis to build on. So I'm going to talk about the first one, and Brendan is going to go into more detail on the second. But first, I'm just going to launch, because I think we're going to be a little bit short on time. So I'm just going to launch the poll in the background, because I'd love to see what um, yeah what kind of organization you're coming from, where your challenges lie. So take a moment to fill out that poll. We'll come back to it at the end of the presentation. All right. Okay. So let's start with the first pattern that we've seen work, which is bottom up, starting at a project level M&E, really focusing on the primary data. You know, the beneficiary registers, the baseline surveys, the impact surveys. There's a lot of value to this because I think this is the most important. Having that quality data to begin with is really so essential, and it helps set clear guidelines and expectations for project M&E across your organization. High quality data, and I do think I am a technology provider, so I'm a bit biased, but I do think that standardizing on a common technology is really important, and we'll get to that in a little bit. Um, but yeah, you start with one country, maybe where you've got a little bit of extra resources, or you've got a good team in place, and that kind of spreads. They share with others, and then all of a sudden you've got three countries using kind of the same playbook, the same processes, and with a bit of work that continues to spread throughout the organization, step by step, until you have a critical mass, um, and you're able to kind of codify this at the organization and say, yes, okay, we're learning from how the field is working, and we can now codify this as the way we do M&E. Okay, so what does that kind of harmonized project level M&E system look like? Well, an M&E system, it's all collecting data. You have a process of something that defines what you do with that data, how you analyze it, the technology you use, how you're using that data, and the people that are involved. Making sure that you've budgeted for it, or that you do budget for it in every proposal. That's really important. And that's another reason for harmonizing this, is so that you make sure that by the time that you get to the time to write the meal plan, that you actually have budgeted for the resources that you need, whether that's people, software, IT, and that you can kind of follow this roadmap. And it's not going to result in the same system for every project, because that's rarely the case for our kind of organizations. But yeah, at least you have the same roadmap for every project. Meal plan, data model, database design, testing, migration of any data if needed, and then within the first month or two of the project, you have a system up and running. You have data you can use to start making and improving the project. Okay, so like I said, that's what we do, is technology. So we're going to zero in on the technology aspect of this. Is how do you pick a technology, or how do you use our technology, ActivityInfo, to make sure that you can actually reproduce this in the second, third, fourth, and fifth countries, or projects or programs, and adapt as needed. So Brendan, you've got this pitch down pat. I mean, can you
Yeah.
give us kind of the intro to what we do, to ActivityInfo?
Yeah, definitely. And this is more just kind of a level setting, so you know what you're seeing when we're providing these demonstrations. Be Data Driven is the company that Alex and Faye and I work for, that Alex founded. And we build ActivityInfo. Our whole mission is to help organizations be better at what they do through better use of data. And we do that by engineering and helping organizations implement ActivityInfo, which is information management software that we've really tailored to the humanitarian and development sector.
All right.
And our whole goal in engineering ActivityInfo is to cover the complete data lifecycle. In my experience, when I have these initial conversations where people are trying to standardize or implement a new M&E system, oftentimes it's kind of brought together in a number of different tools. You might have a data collection tool, then you're using spreadsheets as a database. And then maybe you're using another tool for business intelligence, visualization, analysis. We've engineered to to have one solution that fits that whole life cycle.
Oh yeah,
Next
that's my
slide.
cue. Yeah, there
Yeah.
you go.
And when we think about it in a monitoring and evaluation context, the kind of specific workflows that we're supporting is really around data collection and entry. This is through an offline engineered first web and mobile application. So you can be working online, offline, and it makes no difference to you. It has two-way synchronization as well. We have a really powerful expression language that helps with validation, importing tools that can help you resolve any errors in the data that's being brought in. And then importantly, once we have that well-managed data set, the data, we have tools to help you aggregate it, analyze it, and then ultimately turn it into information that you can disseminate to different stakeholders, whether it's your donors or you're using it for operational needs, et cetera. Okay, I think that's over to you
Yeah.
then.
Okay. Then, yeah, I want to just take you through one of the approaches that I've seen applied by the organizations that we work with. Just going to open up to this is our our website. If you go down to support and then templates, we've got some general templates on the website, but often I think what's effective is that as you're building out these best practices, these standards, these standard operating procedures for M&E, is that you develop your own templates. If you're working in agriculture, then you're going to have your own twist on the kind of data that you capture. That's going to be different than a food program or a cash program. It's typically very useful to create your own templates for the organization, but that means that once you have that template, the next country can use that as a basis, at least as a starting point. And ActivityInfo is designed, it's engineered, as Brendan mentioned, with this idea based on templates rather than kind of a hard-coded app, because every project might end up being very different. So let's start with this template here, webinar demo example. I'm just going to create a new database for my project, and keeping an eye on the time here. Yeah, I think we're doing okay. And so this comes pre-baked with what was maybe standard in my organization. These are all just defined by me. It could be defined by you. I have a folder here in my database for a registry. In this case, the example is around an agricultural program. So I have a list of individuals. I have a list of farms, and you can make those changes so that if you're going from Niger to Cameroon, you're obviously going to be collecting different information. And this system makes it very easy to add those fields. So maybe I want to add a reference now to, I've got my geographic database here somewhere. I've got way too many databases. Or I can upload my own, or I might have something that's specific to my new context. So, for example, I need to know, which language is spoken at home, so that we can tailor our communication. And here you can add those options that are specific to your context. So this allows you, it gives every project kind of a common starting point where you've baked in maybe the key elements that you want to compare across contexts, but it allows the team on the ground to build, those extra elements. And it's not just additional fields, but maybe I've got an agricultural program in Niger, but in Burkina Faso, we've also got a cache component. And so that makes it very easy ActivityInfo makes it very easy to add a new cache distribution form. And we can link that using the reference data back to my farm, so that all of the data is linked together. And we've designed it to be easy enough to use that you can do this in an afternoon. And adapt it to your program. So we'll say, okay, date of planned distribution, the status of the distribution, planned. Brandon, you tell me when maybe I'm going on too long, or if I'm going too fast. Planned, in
Should be
progress,
good for now, I think.
completed. Okay. And so then you can bring in data, you can add data through the form, import it from an API, from a spreadsheet, or you can use our mobile app to take this right to the field. So you don't need a separate mobile data collection tool or to spend the time moving data between those two systems. So I'm just going to configure my browser to pretend that it's a mobile phone. So you can see now I'm going to download this whole database offline so that I've got a copy, and then I can take this with me into the field. Um, I can refer to details on the individual farms that are already registered. So when I make those site visits, the field workers can collect that data right on the spot or verify it. And when I'm tracking activities, I can make those links together so that if I go and I want to add some information about a cash distribution, I can search for the farm that's already been registered, or I can add a new farm on the spot, and then enter in the details right there in the field. And then of course it will synchronize to the server, and it will be right back in your database where you expect it. Now, when you get back to the web app, that gives you now a real-time dashboard tracking and where you can see where exactly your activities are, where the farms are that you're working with or other entities, and track your indicators over time based on these real-time calculations. So that's a really powerful tool, and it means that you can you can make this part of your standard M&E process, but still have it flexible enough to adapt to the different contexts
Mhm.
wherever you go.
That's
Is that
that's really that's really cool, Alex. Just to kind of reiterate the main points there. So the kind of workflow or the architecture, the strategy is kind of a standard template, if you will, with kind of a kernel of forms of data sets and even these reports that are generated. But then you're able to take that to a new context and configure. You can kind of keep what you need and what would be helpful, and then extend, for example, that cash distribution form that you created. Is that what we're seeing
Yeah,
here?
yeah, you got it. I mean, you've said it much more clearly than I was rambling on. But those, yeah, indeed, that's the I think the power of the tool is it allows, local administration, but governance from governance from a regional office or from a global office, and a common technology that's already vetted, that's already working, and that everybody knows how
Yeah,
to use.
yeah, that's
Um,
cool.
yeah, so that's kind of that's the perspective of kind of the ink blot, starting with one country, two countries, and then all of a sudden you're at 10 countries, and then you're in a position, even in a decentralized organization, to say, yeah, okay, I think this is actually working, and this is something that we want to do everywhere. But sometimes there's also a need or a way to start from the. I'll come back to those. These are some good ideas I've written down, but I want to hand it over to you, Brendan, on the kind of second pathway, which is
Yeah,
starting from the top down. Did you want me
yeah.
to tee you up, or did you?
No, I think that's
Yeah.
that's that's great. I think it's nice to kind of see the two next to each other as well. So we were talking about the kind of bottom up or project driven approach where you might have something to get people started, where your experts have done some thinking around, you've developed a template, but ultimately your projects or your countries or your program managers can kind of run free with it in a way. And then maybe afterwards you're going to do some sort of consolidation, but you're benefiting from the knowledge of the organization, the standard technology, but it's very organically grown. We're going to see something a little bit different, where we're assuming kind of more of a top-down approach. Maybe there's some standardization from the HQ or regional office or country office, and then it's going to filter down to the programs or projects. But I think one of the key components is, even in this top-down approach, we still want to allow for flexibility, right? We don't
Yeah.
want everything to be just rigid flowing down. We care about specific global or strategic indicators at HQ, that we need actually our projects to be reporting on. But we also have an understanding that each project is going to be different, and they're going to need flexibility to record for their own operational purposes, for their own M&E purposes. I think I saw someone say that they have multiple masters, so to speak, or
Yeah.
multiple bosses, and those bosses might need to see different things. So you need to allow for some of that flexibility. And I'd like to show you a little bit of an example of what that might look like in ActivityInfo. So let me jump over here. I'm also going to be using one of our templates that Alex showed you. I'm not going to go to the template page, but this is the global M&E database. You can go to the templates page and download it. I'm going to jump to the end, actually. So if we look at this, we have a dashboard that's and this is really meant to, it's all a simplification, but it's really meant to be a synopsis or a summary of the different projects and programs we have going on globally. And we have a few indicators that we're tracking. We're tracking the project status. We have an understanding of those that have been submitted, those have been implemented. We have a breakdown of the projects by theme. We're working in civil society projects as well as environmental projects. There's a breakdown of the budget, requested, secured, and the amount of money that we're going after still, that we've applied for but haven't received yet. And then we have our strategic indicator, right? This is we're really focused on understanding, regardless of what type of project, whether it's environmental, civil society, how many beneficiaries are you reaching? Okay, so we'll come back to this in a minute. I want to jump back to the database. So over here, we can see that I've got this projects form. And I'll open that up and I'll explain a little bit about what we're seeing here. Here we've got a table of projects that are in different phases. We've got the codes in the first column, the status, whether we've submitted the project, whether we're already implementing, and then other information, the title, the theme. We've got total budget, but we're also leveraging the relational model in ActivityInfo, where we can create these sub forms that automatically are connected to our parent records. And we've actually recorded the logical framework for each of these projects as subforms. And we'll show you that in a minute. And then we can also even do our monthly reporting directly here in this one form, where we're tracking the progress of each of these projects through time. And then using some magic and calculated fields, we can pull the most recent records from those monthly reports and let us know whether the progress for the project on track or not. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a role-playing scenario where, okay, I'm an HQ, XYZ project has actually, we just won it. We got funding approved. So we're going to update it from implementing, submitted to implementing, save record. And then I want my project or my project manager, program manager, to go in to this project, and I want them to add the log frame to it and create their first report. So I can go back to my database settings over here, and I already have a role set up for a project manager. And this is important because I have a parameter that I can add to the role that dictates which projects the person has access to. This will make sense in a minute. So I've already added my personal email address. You can see I've got that project manager role. I've assigned XYZ. If I made a mistake, I could update it. but XYZ is correct. And what I'm going to do is actually jump over to the project manager's view of activity info. So bear with me while I jump over there. Okay, here we go. So you should be able to see now that I'm signed in, but my role is actually the project manager here. Right? And if I jump onto that project data set, I don't have access to all those project codes because I've only been assigned XYZ. So now I can go into the logical framework and I can use the importer to actually, we were preparing for this. I've already created this in a spreadsheet. So I can copy and paste the logical framework. This is a very simple one. I've just got 2 outcomes listed. I can paste it in there, import those records, and then I can actually add my indicators here as well. I'm going to use the importer as well. And let's just add that. Here we go. And I think importantly here, when we look at the records that I'm adding, this value for the number of rural households, it's a strategic indicator, right? It's actually going to be assigned that number of direct beneficiaries strategic indicator that we mentioned before. Okay, so this is important when we do our analysis. Remember, we saw the dashboard earlier, and this indicator, although it's tracking, the number of rural households connected to solar mini grids, it's also going to be tracking this global indicator.
That's
okay,
neat. So that's like,
yeah,
you can have the best of both worlds. You've got the project specific indicator or the donor specific indicator, but you can connect that to the upper. Nice.
exactly. And this is a simplified model. We only have a couple of these built out, but you can envision this, extend that. You might have your own list of 6, 10, 20 strategic indicators at the global level. In the project, you might have 50, but 20 of them correspond to your strategic indicators. And then, if we jump back to our global view, our administrator view, and we go back here, and I'm going to refresh. Oh, maybe I didn't submit those records. Maybe I did. Maybe it's just taking a second. No, it's not working. I don't know why. It's okay. But essentially, when we get back here,
Yeah.
yeah, it's demo demons. It always happens.
Yeah.
This will be updated, and it's really easy to create these analyses. If I go to the Analyze tab from the project, I can jump in here, create a dashboard, add a component where I can add the header, call it global view. I can add my icon, and then I can start doing my analyses. I can add these pivot tables where I'm looking at my projects. I want to understand their status. I'll do that as rows so you can see that submitted versus implementing. And I think that we're updated there. So you've got the bar chart. And then I can add a new component there. If I want to look at the projects by theme, I can do that. And I want to get a breakdown as a pie chart series. I'm going quickly, but I kind of want to show you the easiness of creating these different graphics. Alex always tells me that the whole philosophy behind this is to make the easy things easy and the complex things hard. And I believe that to be true. We can look at those strategic indicators too. If we're looking at the performance assessments, we can drop those measures in there. You can see I've got a large quantity, but then if I get down to the strategic indicators, I can see that actually we only have 32 direct beneficiaries. And then I can go in, get rid of the blanks, and then I can actually take a look at the strategic indicators broken down by the project code if I need to. So that kind of creates that table that we saw before. So just wanted to illustrate how, how you can really, string these things together. You can create that kind of top-down um, um, project tracking data set, but then you can delegate access to specific projects where your project leads are actually able to implement their own indicators for the projects they're working on, and then those can roll up to the global level through those nice data visualizations. All right,
Neat.
that's
Yeah.
yeah.
I see a bunch of questions in the chat. Please do take a moment to put them into the Q&A, and then we'll be sure to get to them, or we'll do our best to get to them at the end. I do want to save time for questions, so just maybe we can touch on a couple of points without going into too much detail. First, I want to go back to some of the best practices that we've seen be really helpful in spreading these kinds of systems, whether you're starting from the bottom and at the field level or at the top level. Um, Staff exchanges, I think, are something that work really well and are underutilized in the sector. Like just sending people to a different country for to help a new project start, or spend a couple of weeks with a different team, really can help spread the knowledge, help spread and standardize these processes. Regional workshops, those of course you do see very much more often. Sometimes virtual, sometimes in person, but those are great, forums to communicate, and developing these communities of practice. And um, you know, the question I'd have for you is, do you have these kinds of places where you can ask questions and share within your organization? Whether that's a Teams room, is that a monthly M&E meetup? And if you don't, I mean, think about what you can do to maybe get that started, because that is the power of the decentralized organization, is you don't have to wait for somebody from headquarters to say, oh, we now have a community of practice. Those are things that you can develop step by step with your peers, with your other projects, or even if within your own country office. So yeah, think about those things. There are a lot of tools in a decentralized organization that will help you um, harmonize these processes. Okay, and then the last thing, I'm just going to put this up on the slide, and then I want to go to questions. Is once you've got a system harmonized, standardized, what degree it's standardized or just harmonized or coordinated, as Brendan said, the capability maturity model is a very useful lens to think about your next steps. To think about whether that's your M&E system as a whole, or the technology, the software that you've used. You know, um, a lot of times we'll see that organizations might stop at the repeatable or defined stage, where you do have the same system being applied in multiple contexts, multiple projects. You might have some kind of internal support team, um, maybe not, but to get that extra value out of the system, things like identifying an executive sponsor, aligning it, finding a place for the M&E, this kind of harmonized M&E system within your organization's overall strategy, and actually investing in a team that's responsible for optimizing these kinds of things. That can really bring a lot of value. And of course, we're all in a newly changed context this year, as funding is being cut across the board, not just in the United States, but also in some European countries. But that can actually drive more cohesiveness and harmonization as organizations seek to cut duplicative costs. Like if you're got 3 different technology providers or 10 different technology providers and one home-built system that's being maintained, in 3 different countries, then centralizing, investing in a harmonized system can be an effective way to reduce costs. Okay, my colleague Eliza did a webinar on lessons learned from global M&E systems, where she's gone into the capability maturity model in much more detail. So I'll leave it. I'll leave it there.
Alex, are you
Yeah.
sharing it? I don't think.
Oh
Yeah, yeah.
no.
Sorry.
Oh, God, I've been doing this for how long, and still. All right. This is the slide,
There's, yeah.
the 5 steps. So, it's again, my colleague Elisa did a great webinar. It spent a good amount of time on this model and how you can use it to drive value from your systems. But I'll leave it there, and let's turn to some of the questions and to our poll results. So let's take a quick look at the poll. Yeah, I was actually surprised. According to our participants, more than, what is that? A little bit more than half would describe the organizations that they work as very centralized or somewhat centralized. Be curious if you put in the chat. I mean, what you think of that? What makes it that helpful or challenging in your work? Most people come down on the somewhat harmonization. There is some guidance in the M&E systems, but we do have about a quarter of people saying that there is no harmonization. Every project just does its own thing. It'd be interesting. I'll pull this data into ActivityInfo later, and we can do a crosstab to see how that changes for larger and smaller organizations. Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Let's turn to the questions. We have some specific questions on ActivityInfo that we'll get to, but I think maybe we can start with
In the
some.
actual Q&A.
Yeah,
And there are also people who would like to share their insights on decentralization. Yeah. So I don't know if Bernardo, you are available. We could.
Yeah.
Let me find you.
So it's a little challenging here. Bernardo Vasco Tui?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Bernardo. There we are. Oh, yeah. I think you do have to unmute yourself still. Give you just another moment. Oh, yeah. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Hey, Bernardo.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm not very good in English, as you can see my profile. I'm from Mozambique.
It sounds great.
Yeah, I'm from Mozambique. We are not very good in English, but I will try to do my best. For me, it's my first time to join this meeting, but what I can see is that we are just exploring what is M&E systems to harmonize our tools in terms of data collection for each organization based on the country. But what I would like to share, for instance, in our country, we are implementing project which is related to the sexual reproductive health, which is being implemented as part of consortium members. The consortium members are implementing the model that we call champion of change, the one that we're implementing by girls clubs at the community level. We are ensuring that the children are learning topics related to the sexual reproductive health, and then to go to the health facilities to get contraception methods. So basically, we do what we call annual data collections. The annual data collections, we measure all indicators related to the sexual reproductive health, whereby it's possible to measure the percentage of girls who are accessing the health facilities to get contraceptions. And we actually use Power BI. The Power BI, we measure those indicators from pre and post test, whereby at the beginning of the project, we measure the knowledge in terms of sexual reproductive health. And then at the end of cohort, we also measure what have been changed in terms of
Yeah, that sounds great, Bernardo. How would you characterize your organization? Would you say that you have a harmonized approach to M&E, or did you have to kind of invent all of this on your own?
Yeah, my organization, it's actually working as in safeguarding policy, and most of activities are related to empower the children in terms of sexual reproductive health, and they should be able to decide that what it's very important to decide her life in terms of do not do harms, something like can put them in sexual norms, you know. So my organization is actually committed to work in well-being for children in terms of sexual reproductive health.
That's terrific. Obrigado. Let's turn to, are there anybody else that would like to share, Faye?
We don't have somebody who said, but we have a lot of nice comments in the chat. Mentioning access to fund licenses can sometimes hinder centralization. The fact that sometimes we have two masters, the donor and the organization itself, towards which we have to be accountable.
Yeah.
Funding is mentioned a lot, or shrinking funds, and the approach to localization.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, I mean, I think one just to before we go into the questions, one thing that's on the the funding situation is I think challenging for everybody, but where projects are funded, you know, I do think that donors are still committed to M&E, especially, you know, even maybe more so to get that accountability. And that's why it's important to have kind of a plan and a budget for that, so that that you are able to do M&E at a you know, at a level that corresponds to your organization's values. So yeah, I think that was Matteo that commented on that. If you'd like to add more, just raise your hand and we'll give you the mic. Let's turn to some questions in the Q&A. So this one is for Brendan. Maybe if we go back to your example, Henry, let me give you the mic. Henry is asking, is there a method to aggregate data across databases and reference them to basket indicators? Henry Squire, it looks like you've got a clone in the meeting. Go ahead, Henry.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I forwarded the invite to a colleague of mine, so
okay,
there are two of us. Yeah. Sorry, my question might not be that clear. And actually, I was thinking after I wrote it, maybe there are two questions in it. The first is, you know, we use ActivityInfo in my organization, and we're thinking about, well, we use it in some projects, and we're trying to roll it out across, you know, more projects, things like that. But the first one is trying to aggregate data from across the projects into the kind of institutional level reporting. So can we pull data from all the different databases that we have, and kind of pull it all together in one place, for, you know, for simple indicators which are all the same. But then in another level, as we all know, like a lot of projects have very specific indicators which are similar in nature, but different depending on the context. So let's say like one project will report on how many jobs have been created. One project will report on how many people have attended a training to improve their livelihoods, this type of thing. But essentially, what we would be able to do is try and kind of pull the data from those two indicators together and create a basket indicator. Let's say, you know, improving livelihoods is the basket indicator, and you could pull the information from the jobs, an increase in jobs, and you can pull the information from the increase in livelihoods. So just wondering, I mean, it's obviously quite difficult to do on kind of databases, but do you think there's a way that you're able to kind of code something in, like a reference to an institutional indicator in the database, so that you'll be able to kind of access that information relatively quickly and automatically rather than doing it in like a manual sense? Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's maybe I can start, Alex, and then you can
Yeah.
you can kind
And
of
if
fill
you
in the
want to share
gaps.
your screen, you can show that strategic indicator, because I think that you had up on your screen. So I think
Yeah. And I can also show the I had forgotten to do my monthly report. That's why it didn't update. So it gives me an opportunity to show it actually does work. Yeah. One way of doing that, in the reference data, this is very simple, right? Where we have two strategic indicators, but you can envision this being a longer list depending on your organization. And the way that we have it structured in this simplified view is in the projects. If we kind of dig down, if we're using that same example in the logical framework to the indicator, if here we're selecting the actual indicator is the number of rural households connected to solar mini grids or standalone systems, but actually we're kind of assigning it as a strategic indicator of number of direct beneficiaries. So as long as it's you're comparing like to like things, then that's one way of doing it is by in the data model having a strategic indicator field that can be assigned to your strategic indicator or left blank. And then when you're doing your analyses, it's going to roll up and you'll see that view here. Another way that you could see it happening is you could use calculated fields. So for example, if you had you had your indicators, you could, or let's say you're kind of capturing them in a single data table where you've got it could be your different aggregations for ages, or in that case, I forget the specific use case you had, but then you could create another field, a calculated field where you're actually going to just aggregate those or sum those. So that could be your kind of basket indicator, where it could be indicator 1 plus indicator 2. But of course, that would be in your data table, and you could just use the builder to do that. And there's also ways that you could do that at the calculation level when you're doing analysis. If we're doing a pivot table, where you can actually do calculated measures, that same formula editor would work. Where if you have some sort of logic that you're implementing there, or expression that you're implementing there. Alex, I think you probably have some other examples as well.
Well, I think there's one choice that you have to think about first, is whether you want do you want this as a live view across projects, or do you want it to be something that individuals share on a quarterly basis, like after it's signed off on and validated? Because with if you say, yeah, I've got 10 projects and I just want to feed them all into one dashboard in a single indicator, then you can use calculated measures to do that. And as people are being registered, your number is going to go up on the global dashboard. But that in some cases that's what you want. In other cases, it might be more like, no, at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, we want the data to be reviewed. We want the country manager to sign off on it, and then we put that number into a form like Brendan showed, and then roll those different indicators up. So that's also a choice to make depending on what you need. Does that make sense, Henry?
Yes, it does. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right. We've got another question here from Mulatu Esheti. Let me see if I can find you in the list of people. Participants.
And maybe, Alex, you want to also share your screen if you're about to share ActivityInfo or something.
Okay. Let's see if we get into that. Brendan, I know you've got to go to another call, so I'll let you I think he's already dropped off. So
Yes,
all right.
Brennan has already moved to another call.
Okay.
But yeah, he thanks
Mulatu,
everybody.
would you like to ask your question? Didn't quite understand from what you typed. I'm also going to queue up Mehmet Sundu. Mehmet, did you want to ask your question?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Hi. I just want to ask, like, with ActivityInfo, are we gonna be able to like do some coding, or like it's just the way that you showed us, like dropping and dragging the tools?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thanks Faye for reminding me to share my screen. Let me show you a couple places in ActivityInfo where you can get started um, with formulas and the expression language. So I think, can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, the idea is to make simple things simple. So if you can do it with drag and drop, that's ideal. But sometimes you do need something slightly more complex. So for example, here in my registration form, I have a date of birth, and you might want to calculate your age, right? So here we're using ActivityInfo's formula language to find um, the difference between the date of birth and today. Our formula language is based on Excel's. We try to make it as similar as possible. So this formula would work in Excel as well, and that gives you a formula. But you can then you can see that here. You can also add. If you go into views, you can create your own view, maybe an ad hoc formula. Even if you're not a database administrator, you can add a quick calculation. Maybe I want to know what would be interesting here. Maybe just the initials, right? So I'll just take left for the first initial of this person's name. So you can do some formulas there. You can use these for validation to show up in the data entry form, as needed. For analysis, our calculated measure language is quite powerful. I think I have an example here in our dashboard. If we go to the number of unique, let's see, number of unique recipients. Let me go into this table. Yeah, so here we can add a calculated measure, and here you can calculate, you can join tables together or union them. So I might want to union several different activity trackers together. And this part of our language is based on DAX from Power BI. So if you're familiar with that, we could take all of the people who participated in a training. So let's take everybody from the participants, union those together, and then count distinct ID. That would give you the number of across all the activities, the number of unique number of people that have participated in at least one activity. Does that answer your question, Mehmet?
Yes, Alex. Thank you. And if there is no one else, can I ask another question, please?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Uh, like I wonder how you like store the data, and are there any possibilities like to have the local host if we prefer to use ActivityInfo, for instance, to local host in our country?
Yeah, for sure. So we host the data in Europe on activeinfo.org, but our self-managed server, you can download, run it on really any server that you need to. You can freely download it from our website. It comes with a 60-day trial. You have Docker images for Ubuntu, Windows installer. It's super easy to run on your own hardware, wherever you want to run it.
Yeah, actually, my question is much more related to the like never storing on your database, but using your application and storing in our country, like localhost.
Yeah. Though that's so. Sorry, I think I was showing the wrong tab. If you go down here, you can download self-managed server to the from our website. Put this in the chat, and you can download the server, the software to run on your own computer. And we never see the data. We have no access to the data. It doesn't talk to our servers at all. It runs completely on your own hardware.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Okay, we've got one more. I think maybe time for one more question. This was answered live. Let's see. So, yeah, Henry, it looks like you are your clone. Can you assign one person to report on different projects when assigning roles? Yeah, there's other ways you can set the rules any way that you need to. One convenient way, different than what Brendan did, was to you could have actually in the project form have a field for the project manager and use that as the source for the permissions. And that way, a person could be assigned to 4 or 5 different projects, and you can assign multiple people to a project. So definitely a possibility, and happy to help you offline further on that. All right, so I think with that, unless I'll give Mulatu one more chance, but I know we are over time, so he or she may have had to leave. Mulatu, do you want to ask your question? No? Okay. Well, I really appreciate everybody joining today. I hope it was useful. Please leave us feedback in the survey. It's just genuine feedback. I'd be curious to see if you found the topic useful, other topics that you'd be interested in hearing about from our team. We have a series of webinars coming up, so there's more from us and the team. So take a look at our website under support and webinars, and yeah, join us for the next one.